Hey everybody, it's Joe DeGanzik, and this is Smarter Home Life. It's my longer commentary episode. I expected actually the Q&As would come kind of between the previous Apple video and this one, but they're going to come out most likely in the next 24 hours instead, because there's a couple demos with that, so a little more complicated than traditional Q&As. So stay tuned for those and some other cool stuff actually coming up this week that I may have mentioned before. But on to the Apple stuff. This is the longer version of some of what I talked about on Monday following the big keynote. I want to remind everyone that these videos are made possible by our insiders. You'll see also, yes, we've got ads, we've got Amazon links and so forth, but to make all of this work, everything kind of has to be firing on all thrusters. And one day we hope to get rid of the ads, and that's with your kind help. People like Michael D., one of our Patreon supporters who's been supporting for the longest at the top level, which is fantastic. So you can join him, you can learn all the information about it. There's a quick handy link, supportshl.com, that'll forward you over to Patreon. There's different perks and rewards and behind the scenes cool stuff. You can get sneak previews of upcoming videos and reviews and whatnot, and it helps directly support the show. And actually, if you go to the support page on the website, I'm giving away too many different links, but you can go anywhere you want basically to those different areas. If you're not interested in kind of a monthly type thing, there's other ways to support the show. You can find that on smarterhomelife.com/support. But anyways, supporting the show is definitely a way to guarantee that Smarter Home Life will be around for the long term. And this is something that's not just a fly-by-night operation. It's supposed to become truly a full-time thing and really a fantastic resource for people. In fact, the other thing I've been doing lately, a lot of it seems, is actually helping people out with consulting time via FaceTime and Skype and so forth when questions and emails just don't quite cut it, and that's another service that I offer. So anyways, you can send in your emails always. I try to answer at questions@smarterhomelife.com, and anything that can't be done via email, we can do it via a session, and that's at a reasonable cost. So let's get on to the commentary and so forth. I definitely thank all the supporters for your support. Support.shl.com. And please sign up. It helps. Every little bit helps quite a bit. So let's talk about some additional news that came out this week through some of the different little bits and pieces. You know, obviously Apple leaks a little bit of things. They tell journalists one story, they tell the other journalists a little bit more. And there were obviously sessions that were for the developers, because it really was a developer conference. You don't always see as much consumer interest in what happens at WWDC, except when they introduce new hardware, which there were, you know, the iPad news and the refreshed Mac line and so forth. But really, this is a developers conference, and then all this stuff is going to be in the beta software that's out, and they'll do the public betas we believe at the end of June, and then the big releases will happen during the fall, starting usually right about a couple days after the new iPhone announcement, which will be sometime in September, which everyone's waiting for because it's the big 10th anniversary stuff. So let's talk about what probably was going to be in the iPhone and in iOS in terms of HomeKit. I'm going to largely go through the same process as my recap video, but this one's going to be longer. I've got a little timer going, so I'm not going to go over hopefully 20 or 25 minutes, but just some additional commentary. You can read an article that I talked about Siri over on iOShacker.com that I wrote. It went up about 2 days ago, kind of the future of Siri and where that's going. I'll touch a little bit on that. So let's jump over to what's going to be new in HomeKit that we didn't learn on Monday. Some of this has been reported on. I'm not going to give you all the exact technical details, but the basic stuff. So some new events. You know, one of the challenges with HomeKit has been that it's not as flexible, not as powerful as people would like, especially people like me who've been programming home automation for a long time. And when I look at these new platforms, I'm like, well, that's cute, but that doesn't do what I want. So for Apple to bring some of that more advanced home automation and make it easy and accessible to everyone, that's really where the power lies. And I still feel like Apple has a good chance not to completely dominate the home automation space, but the fact that HomeKit is built into iOS, the Home app that they created is built into iOS, and all you have to do is get one of these devices, a smart plug, a smart lock, a smart lighting system, smart bulbs coming soon. We're still waiting on the hubless version of smart bulbs that are really reliable anyways. Any of these products, bring it home, connect it up, and you're good to go. You're in the home automation game. So new things for HomeKit date-based events. Right now you can do things such as, hey, do this every day at 7 a.m. But you can't say, I need you to do this every exact date, right? Once a month on this exact date, not just a day of the week. You can do the day of the week thing right now. So that's important. Offset for sunrise and sunset, because sometimes you may have a challenge of maybe during sunset your home's windows or the lights that is coming into your home, it gets darker in your home before sunset actually happens, and so you need that offset to happen. Or you might want to use it as a randomization perhaps, because I believe there's a randomization feature, so that maybe before sunset, 20 minutes before, 15 minutes after, same thing with sunrise, and maybe you can randomize that so that you fool, that's the old adage of, oh, automate your lights while you're away so it makes it look like you're home, and the potential would-be burglars will be scared away. Don't know how actually in real practice that actually works, because of course the burglars know about home automation these days, but still a good idea. And if you adjust it, if you randomize those kind of things, that really helps, because it can make the home look more lived in, because we don't always live on an exact schedule. I know I certainly don't. Gating between significant events in terms of sunrise and sunset. This is saying to be able to do kind of some if-then logic to say, well, we want to say if it's only between these times, right? So, and that goes for thresholds and ranges, which are for temperatures. This really gets into where we can say, all right, if something happens, like a sensor opens or detects something, a motion sensor detects something, we want to actually only have a reaction happen during a certain time, maybe during a certain time between sunset and sunrise, or after or before sunset and or sunrise. Same thing with temperature ranges, which they haven't been able to do very well before, so that's going to be something new. That could support something perhaps like those automated colored lighting indicators that I've done in the past based on temperature. If something happens during this for a certain temperature range, but perhaps only during a certain time period, right? So instead of having something run all the time. They also introduced, I'll leave this one to the end because it's really cool. They also introduced, let's get turn off after trigger. Something in terms of like an automatic off. They talked about like patio lights. If motion is detected, or if you have a door and window sensor on like a patio door and you want to go out to the patio for a little while, and maybe set it for a half an hour, and the patio light will turn on automatically if you open up a door or window at night. Granted, that may not make sense if you're coming in from the patio, but anyways, it's an example, so go with it. Springboard off of these ideas. Open the door to the patio, go outside, maybe hang out for a little while, come back in, and you can set a kind of a timer, a default, a timeout, so that light will turn off automatically after a certain amount of time. That's something you can't do in HomeKit right now, but you will be able to in the iOS 11 version. All of this, of course, now available to developers, and I'm going to be putting it on one of my iOS devices and reporting on it, and playing around with it and testing it. So lots of cool new stuff. Let's see, an execute once event trigger. That's, again, something for, hey, let's make something execute only one time instead of all the time. I ran into a problem trying to make those, trying to make the fan automation work, and also trying to make the colored lighting based on temperature automation work, because they fired all the time. They just kept going and going and going, and I wanted something to just happen once, right? If you detect this, just fire it off once, not constantly. So sometimes you want constant, sometimes you don't. So they're adding more of this ability. How much of this they add to the Home app is a question, and we'll find out as the beta is out and they keep adjusting the beta. So I'll be finding that out and I'll be sharing it with you. most likely some of the more advanced automation stuff they'll leave for the developers to add to their own apps. Obviously, we know that some of the apps like the iDevices and the Eve app are very good. They support really all the device types. They're really good with adding rules and triggers. The original Home app, which is, I believe, 15 or 20 bucks, but well worth it before Apple created their own Home app, will also most likely support all of this stuff, and you'll get some true power. The last thing, and I was just answering an email about this with one of the questions that came in, not for the show, but it'll probably wind up on the show next month anyways, just on the Q&A next month for June, is presence detection. And many of you have said, well, how do you make this work? Like, home and away are great if you live by yourself or everyone's on the same schedule. But what if you're on different schedules and you've got a family, or you're just you and your spouse? Apple's going to make this easier. They're going to do presence detection, and they're going to do multi-user presence detection, so that not only it's going to just trigger, you can set up triggers based on one iPhone or one iOS device, but multiples. So that what that means is, and they demoed this, saying that we're not going to trigger, say, an away mode unless all the devices have left the premises. And we're not going to trigger a return from away mode until the first device comes back in, and we're not going to do anything once additional devices come back into the household either. So that's has been possible on other platforms, hasn't been possible with HomeKit, and so that's really, really important. They're also, I believe, going to support presence triggers in terms of, or actually presence, this would be like an if-then logic to do something if I'm home or not. That hasn't been possible either. It's just been a trigger on I came home or I left, not please, like things like I only want this kind of stuff to happen assuming I'm home. And I believe that's another one of the kind of logic things that will be in HomeKit in iOS 11. So this is really good stuff. Whether they didn't specifically say whether they would be customizable, because I know this will be your next question. Well, okay, so if I get home first versus, say, my significant other, can I have a preference? They didn't specifically say that. I'm going to have to dig into the beta and take a look at all this and some of the documentation, whether that's possible. That would be really killer, because you might have preferences when you get home. Maybe you want certain lights on versus your significant other. They want something else. Maybe music turns on. Maybe the air conditioning is set differently. So that would be really powerful. And since they're detecting iOS devices and users, essentially, that would be probably pretty easy to do. The other thing will be how they're going to implement this. Right now with HomeKit and sharing, you're sharing your home to another account, but HomeKit really has only been tied to one iCloud account. So they may be expanding that. Again, we'll have to dig into some details. It's only been a couple days since the Wednesday developer session for HomeKit. So that's like the nitty-gritty of what's in the new version of HomeKit. So that's pretty powerful. I kind of assumed, based on the description originally of the session, they were going to do more with Siri. They still could, and they could announce something in September that we don't even know about, but that's a little bit more on the speculation side. So I'm going to go back to my other notes here, and so that's kind of what really is new in HomeKit. We know that speakers are being added, so there's the assumption that you'll be able to do some sort of playback as part of scenes. I would really hope so, and we'll kind of look at that. The Apple TV will act as a speaker as well. So just in case you don't want to invest in the $350 HomePod or wait for it, you'll be able to play with some of this come September, or if you're on the beta, you'll be able to play with that this summer. So, and that's kind of the fun stuff. Like, I do that. I have Indigo running on the Mac back there, and it controls iTunes playback when I'm not here. And potentially, I have kind of like a silly romantic scene I think of demo that like puts on like funny, kind of cool like jazz, smooth jazz music. And so I can do that kind of stuff. But right now, before iOS 11 at least, you can't do that with HomeKit. And that's the fun stuff with automation. I've talked about and demoed the silly voice response stuff. That seems to not be in HomeKit either, and it's totally possible. They could totally put in speech to text, like, when this scene runs, hey, make my iPhone do something, or hey, have it announce something on the Apple TV or on the connected speakers, like, I have a, welcome home, so-and-so, that's the fun stuff, and I wish Apple would focus a little bit more on that than just the basics. But they're very well known for just being a little bit conservative, and they move slowly, and well, there we go. So I hope more of that will come. The other big news about HomeKit that also was not said in the keynote and dribbled out, and then they talked about it more in that developer session, was software authentication. Well, two parts. Number one, that they're opening it up to all developers. If you have a developer account at all at Apple, you can do HomeKit. You don't have to make a commercial product. That means people with like Arduinos and Raspberry Pis, you can start tinkering with HomeKit because you can download the HomeKit, all the details, basically the HomeKit framework. You can download it, you can start working with it, and you can make your own HomeKit devices based on the software implementation, and that is actually incredible. It opens up hobbyists and tinkerers, and heck, even maybe I might actually start making my own HomeKit devices here and seeing what things are possible with it. And the other half of that is that traditionally with HomeKit devices in the past 3 years, it's not a long time, they've always required a hardware authentication chip. This has been the barrier to companies making devices HomeKit enabled, because they've had to re-release devices because they've got to actually put new hardware in it. Now Apple is kind of stepping back, not necessarily admitting, well, we made a mistake, but they really wanted to focus on security and privacy, which are really good goals. So now they're going to say we can actually do this with software authentication. They said it's still going to be encrypted. They're going to have some ridiculously secure connection. But I think they've learned that they just can't have this big ecosystem of devices that they want unless they actually relax the standards a bit. So hardware authentication or software authentication, I guess perhaps you could have both too. This could enable manufacturers, if they choose to take their legacy devices, like the old version of the August smart lock that you couldn't get to work with HomeKit unless you bought the new version of it. The same thing with what Philips Hue had to do. They had to put the authentication chip into the new Hue bridge. Same thing that Lutron had to do with the Casita system for their lighting solution. They had to release a new bridge that was HomeKit compatible. Same thing Insteon has had to do, and I could go on and on and on. So now we could see crazy things, and granted, crazy is not necessarily out of the spectrum, because we did hear that Apple and Amazon have apparently kissed and made up, and that Amazon Prime Video is coming to the Apple TV. So something ridiculous could happen. Maybe the Nest thermostat and Nest products might become HomeKit compatible because it would be a software thing. If all of this stuff happens, this fall is going to be very, very, very interesting, and the competition is going to really heat up between Apple, Google, and Amazon. Sorry Samsung, sorry Bixby, sorry Microsoft and Cortana. I just think they're kind of number 4 and number 5. So I'm picking number 1, 2, and 3 as being the big 3 that I just mentioned. So anyways, it's going to be really interesting. That the next half of the year, it's going to be really interesting with HomeKit as they really expand out. So let's move on past that, because that's all we know at this point. So we'll be talking about this through the summer. The summer's a little bit of a lull. I'm going to go through a few more product reviews, and then we're going to get to some how-to content for the remainder of the summer until we get back to, tech announcement season starting in September for the holiday shopping season, because, they want you to start shopping for your holiday gifts in like August at this point. So, all right, let's move on to Siri. And I talked about this a bit in the article that I put out for on iOShacker.com, which I think is still on their main page. I'll include a link to it in the video description. So anyways, Siri is just not as useful as these other systems because it just doesn't know everything about the world, right? You can ask Siri questions that you can also ask of Lady A and also of the Google Assistant, and you will not get the same answer, or you will get fewer details, or you'll get a web search result. This is because Apple really wants all of this intelligence that they build with machine learning. They want it to stay on your device. They don't want it to go to the cloud. They don't want it to go to iCloud. In iOS 11, it's going to allow iOS 11 will allow the intelligence that Siri builds on your device to be shared across all of your iOS devices on that iOS account. Apple wants this stuff to stay on the device or your devices that are tied to your particular iCloud account. That intelligence that's built on the devices will be shared across there, but it's not going to leave your account. It's not going to go out to iCloud necessarily and be stored out there. So that's important. Apple, of course, it's really important for privacy sakes. For Apple to continue going down this road. And this is what differentiates them. Let's just face it, right? Apple versus Google versus any of the other big providers that want to use the cloud as a way of making their artificial intelligent assistants and just their AI that's part of their overall strategy better. Apple's doing it privately. They're doing it more on a public basis, even though they're anonymizing your data to a certain extent. People are really still concerned about that. I use Google services primarily for the business world that I'm in, for everything revolving smarter home life. I really don't use it necessarily that much for my own personal world. I'm kind of old-fashioned and keep everything on old-fashioned email inboxes that all get downloaded and everything is encrypted and stored and backed up. But anyways, for people who live in the cloud, it's a different story. But for Apple, it's a privacy thing. It's a trust thing as well. They want you to trust the fact that Apple's going to keep all your information safe and on your device. And that does go for HomeKit. It does go for Siri and all the intelligence. And the more that you use Siri in terms of, if you have all of your email with Apple, if you have all of your stuff with it, it's going to be smarter, but only so smart. And Apple will have to really continue to build things over the next couple of years to make Siri more intelligent about the world. But they don't have a search engine. They don't have Google, and that is a big factor. So I'm not saying that Siri's going away. I'm not saying that, oh my God, Apple's doomed. They're about to go out of business. They got hundreds of billions of dollars in the bank. They're not in trouble, but they're going to continue going down their road, and their users are going to be happy with that. And they're just going to have to work on being great at what they do and not necessarily saying, well, we are better than the Google Assistant. We are better than Lady A over at Amazon. I think it's just going to always have to be telling this story of mixing privacy with trying to make a really amazing assistant. This leads me into the HomePod. I can't really say that much about Siri because we didn't learn that much about it, and I watched a number of the developer sessions on Siri, and it looks like they're still continuing along with adding some capabilities to Siri. Specifically, they talked about some payments and some messaging and some list apps, like, you know, add this to your I use the app called Things, so you'll have that ability. But it really is like a one-way kind of thing. It could be, you know, the information coming back in, but it really is, you're just allowed to do certain things with Siri that Apple has decided that you can do. And it's not just the developers being able to hook into Siri like willy-nilly like they can with the Google Assistant. It really is more of Apple's kind of control here. So it's only going to get so much more powerful, and it will be able to surface some information. Apple Watch, they demoed, they talked about things on the iPhone as well, but really I thought they were going to extend that intelligence, like surfacing information and being really intelligent in terms of HomeKit and home automation, like Vivint is doing. Vivint is a managed smart home provider. They introduced a platform called Sky, not Skynet for like robots that will come invade your home and take over your life, at CES this year, and it was a way of your home automation devices. And they support the Echo and a few other things, the Nest and whatnot, but they also have their own devices that they sell and that they kind of will place into your home. And it's a monthly fee type thing for the service. But the service would be able to learn from your behavior by you just using your devices and coming and going from your home. And ultimately, with your consent at each step of the way, learn your behaviors, suggest things to you saying, hey, we noticed you left home. Maybe you might want to, you know, if it's the summer, turn up the AC to a higher temperature. In the winter, you know, obviously do the opposite. lock the doors, turn the lights off, those kind of things. And eventually it would learn those things, get your consent to start doing them with your permission, and eventually just do those things for you and then let you know, hey, yeah, we took care of it for you. I thought Apple might be going down this road. It looks like they might not be this year. Sadly, we don't get giant updates throughout the year. We just get the one massive update and some small iterative updates. They could do this next year, and that could be something that they use in Siri intelligence for, which would be fine because it could learn specifically about your behavior and react just to you, and again, potentially to other members of your family and of your household. That would be a great way of keeping HomeKit and all of the home data secured and private just to you, and not have to think about, well, we mixed your data with all this other stuff that we learned about the world and we're going to apply this to you. No, just keep it as what you're doing. I think that's what Vivint is doing as well. I'm not sure what their privacy practices are, but I would assume that the AI is going to actually just focus on their specific users in their specific homes, and not be like comparing what they're doing to other things. So Apple could go down that road. I think it would be a great use of Siri and this new intelligence, but time will tell. So let's move to HomePod. HomePod is a speaker with a side of Siri built in. They really didn't market it any differently than that. They said, we're going to reboot, we're going to reinvent home audio. Well, I asked actually, and I wanted to kind of give you some live results here. I asked this, I did a poll yesterday, Saturday morning, on the Facebook page. If you don't follow Smarter Home Life on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, please do, because I post things regularly, not just this stuff, but I post polls and other kind of cool stuff about the smarter home. And so if I jump back here, I actually asked everybody, who listens to home audio? I think the exact thing was, do you listen to music at home via speakers? So let's look at some of these results. There was actually a lot of it. Very little through our Sonos. One person said, right now, just through the Amazon Dot. We pre-wired our surround sound, but no speakers yet. Sadly, I mostly listen through my phone speakers, the Echo Dot. We have 3 Sonos Play 1, 2 Sonos, so another Sonos user. Of course, how would I listen to music at home? There's no reason to use headphones. Sonos, and a Bose. So a lot of Sonos. That's what Apple's going for with the HomePod, which is more expensive, almost twice as expensive as the base, which I believe it's the Play 1 from Sonos. Sonos, if you don't know what it is, it's a connected speaker system and really has a big following in the tech community and kind of the geek community. They're very good with whole home audio, and they're basically one of the only people who have nailed absolute simultaneous playback of music wirelessly to multiple speakers. Usually there's a challenge, you get delays and you get echo and it just doesn't sound right, but they've really nailed it. Apple didn't specifically talk about that, but we're assuming if they're really pushing forward in this area that they really are going to push forward with HomePod being able to do simultaneous transmission of audio and playback through AirPlay 2, the new AirPlay standard that is also launching as part of iOS and this whole refresh of all of the different operating systems this year. So not till December. It's $350. It's 7 tweeters. It's a custom subwoofer. They really talked about all the custom amplifiers and the fact that it sounds like it's going to do it through sonar. It's going to understand through its microphone array on the top of it and emitting sound. It's going to identify the acoustics, like the dimensions of where you place it in a particular room. And of course, it could work with multiples, because putting one of these in a certain spot of your place in your space, it's only going to be mono. And they're going to be doing all of this audio processing to make the sound sound as great as possible. Not just the sound, but they're going to be enhancing like the ambient, the ambient part of the music. They're going to be enhancing the vocals. So a few people have gotten to hear this thing. They said it sounded really great. Obviously, it was probably in a very, very, very tightly controlled area and a demo. So in the real world, it'll be really interesting. I assume that they're going to start leaking this to journalists. They don't always go for the smaller sites and the smaller technology presences like Smarter Home Life, but the big guys will get it probably, you know, a couple weeks or so before the big rollout, and so you'll see all those articles come out. I will probably have to buy one just because I need to report on it, but I don't enjoy the concept of spending $350 on a single speaker that's not going to necessarily produce stereo sound. I do love music, and I have heard music on very high-end audio systems, and I love it, but that's a lot of money. So it's going to be a great speaker. It's only going to be AirPlay. There's no Bluetooth on board, so you can't just stream from any other device to this. And it didn't sound like they were going to support any other services built in. It was just going to be Apple Music and potentially your own iTunes music library in terms of talking to Siri as a musicologist, because it's going to support more things like, you know, what's playing and who played the who was on the drums on this particular song. Whole list of it. You can see it on the recap video from Monday. New commands for Siri on the HomePod. So they didn't talk much about Siri on the HomePod, I think because they're still working on it and they didn't want to announce something that perhaps they can't fulfill in December. My theory, and the theory from many other journalists, and one or two of them heard officially or unofficially from Apple, that there's going to be a lot more news that they will share in September. This makes total sense. They have teased this thing out with, we didn't even see a physical thing on stage, but there were many HomePod models in the demo room after the event that journalists, you know, snapped many photos and videos of. So it's a real product, but we're going to hear a lot more in September. My theory is they have got to introduce third-party, quote-unquote, skills for Siri to operate and to do not maybe as much as Google Assistant or Lady A, but the fact is they can't come out with something that's just not a good comparison. That's just not a product that competes on any level that's really not similar to the capabilities of these other services. If they do, I just feel like they're going to go after the audio crowd first, and obviously they can upgrade this with software because it's all cloud-based through iCloud anyway. I just feel that they really have to do something that will wow everybody, because at this point, I'm underwhelmed, and personally, I really don't feel like buying it because it's Siri. I can get this on all of my iOS devices at this point, and they are late to the game, right? This would be the third, actually in terms of announcements, they're fourth, because Cortana from Microsoft is going to be on the Harman Kardon and also the HP speakers that are coming out sometime this fall. And we haven't heard from Samsung and Bixby. They're in last place at this point. So Apple's in number 4 spot in terms of announcing these devices, and they will seemingly be number 4 in actually having a product that's actually out there in your home. So how they're going to do, I don't know. They're certainly not going for the bottom of the market. Apple doesn't do that, but I think they tend to forget. I think Apple sometimes just forgets the fact that they gained this huge following over the past 10 years. People in the Apple world used to have to spend a lot of money to get into the Apple world, and the iPhone changed that game. Everyone could get an iPhone because it was, you know, it was once they had it on the subsidized provider plan through all the major providers, everybody could get an iPhone, right? And it wasn't, you can still now, you can get cheaper iPhones if you just don't get the latest model. So it really became something for everyone to have. Everyone could have a bit of Apple, and it was an awesome thing. And now they're going for the high-end part of the market with a speaker that they're, you know, an always-on listening smart speaker for the home. And I feel like they have forgotten the fact that they could easily make 2 versions of this, a less expensive model, perhaps that doesn't have the awesome high-end audio capabilities, and the awesome model. And they could not necessarily corner the market, but they could at least be on parity. There was a report that came out. There's a company called Voice Labs, and they put out a report quarterly called the Voice Report. And they do studies on these voice-first devices like the Echo and the Google Home. And they found that 70% of consumers, when polled, would not purchase another one of these devices from another company, right? If they've already chosen Amazon or they've chosen Google, 70% of people would say, yeah, I'm good. We're happy. And at this point, the market is cornered by Google and Amazon, right? That's it in terms of that's what's out there. If Apple, perhaps everyone buys the HomePod, then great. Or maybe there will be a HomePod mini that they haven't even talked about yet. Maybe that's what gets announced in September. Who knows? If Google comes out with a Google Home Mini or whatever they might call it, they're going to give Amazon a run for the money. If Amazon lowers the price again of the Dot at Black Friday down to like $25, boom, you're immediately capturing more of that market. But again, 70% of people, they're going to buy into an ecosystem and they're probably not going to buy another one. I've got both because, well, I review this stuff. I live in this world and that's what I have to do. So which one do I use? Don't tell Apple. Don't tell poor Siri. Don't tell Lady A. But it's Google Home. Because you know what? It gets it done. It sounds friendlier. It gets the things done. It can hear me anywhere around. It can hear me over podcasts, over the microwave, over the fridge running, over appliances. It's amazing. Sorry, Apple. Anyways, these are my thoughts on this. Whether I could be completely wrong, but my theory is that if Google comes out with a cheaper version of the Google Home, they're going to win the race. Ultimately, they're going to still have to take some of the slack up from Amazon and because they were first, but they're going to be really, really, really out there and really, it's going to be neck and neck. I feel like Siri is going to be number 3. Sorry, Apple lovers, but anyways. And my thoughts on the HomePod is, well, we're just going to have to wait for the fall. But I do feel that they've got to get the voice interactions down. Right now, Siri allows you to do certain things, obviously getting, ride sharing and starting workouts and things like that. But that's going to have to be completely voice enabled and voice only for it to work on the HomePod. And they probably haven't figured that stuff out yet. So they're working on it. We'll hear more about that in September. And as for the Apple TV, because it is a kind of a HomeKit device, but we didn't hear really anything except for the fact that Prime is coming to the Apple TV in terms of Amazon Prime. So my theory is maybe we might see some sort of new Apple TV refresh because they spent like a minute talking about tvOS and there was practically nothing of importance that came out in terms of the operating system stuff of the developer sessions at WWDC that talked about tvOS, other than like a dark mode, automatic, and a couple minor changes which didn't sound very interesting at all. So my theory is we might get new hardware in September. So that's it. That's my discussion. I'm actually doing pretty well on time. So that's all I have to say, and we'll see throughout the summer. I'll be playing with the beta of iOS 11 and the new Home app, and we'll kind of be pushing its limits and capabilities, and I'll be back to talk about some of those little things and with probably little how-to sneak peeks. Once the public beta comes out, it'll be safer for you to download that to your iOS device. Still wouldn't recommend using the public betas even on production devices because you could easily have problems. But if you have like a secondary device or an iPod Touch or something like that, it's a good way to test it, and that's how I will be testing it over the summer until we get to September when it goes completely public. So that is that. Be sure to subscribe to the channel. Check out smarterhomelife.com. That website's going to get a refresh here probably in the next month or so. It just needs a little bit of some display and help to get a kind of a new design, and you can now subscribe to that to the website through RSS, and you can find us on Apple News, and we are now listed through Google News, the search service as well. So kind of making our inroads, and you'll see articles written by me showing up on more websites outside of smarterhomelife.com over the summer. So that's it. I'm Joe DeGanzik for Smarter Home Life. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll have the additional videos and the Q&As coming out shortly, and some surprise content this week. And that's it. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you next time.